What's up guys, this is Josh from KeepItTechie, and today I wanted to do a brief overview of the Linux file structure. So as I stated in the intro, I wanted to do a quick overview, just a high level overview of the Linux file structure. Just showing you guys what all those files actually mean under the root directory and what they're actually used for. Similar to the C drive in Windows, you have your Windows directory, and then, all those files underneath this System32 program files. It's a lot different the way it actually works. But it does have some similarities. So I wanted to go through, break down each one of those folders, kind of give you an overview, a high level overview of what's actually in all those folders, so you can have a better understanding of how the Linux operating system works. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is go to the root directory, which is the highest level of the Linux directory or the Linux file system. So if we go cd and then press / and press enter, that'll take us to the root directory. So I changed directories to the root directory. And if we ls this, this will list out all the system directories. And I want to go on and show you each one of these folders and what they actually do. So in order to make it a little bit simpler, I'm going to do a ls-l, which will list out everything in a table structure so you guys can see. Now I won't get into breaking out these columns. I'll do that on another video where I'm talking about permissions and users and ownership. I just want to break down what each one of these folders are and what they actually do. So starting from the top, the bin directory is a location for common programs shared by the system and the system administrator and other users. So as you can see, it's a link, and it links to user bin. That's normally what's located in these files. And the next directory is actually the boot directory. Now this is a very important directory. This is what allows your system to boot up. It has all the startup files and the kernel. And also grub is located there. And I won't go through and show you guys all that, but grub is pretty much a small program that actually boots up the operating system, or allows you to select the operating system that you want to boot up. But that's all located there. Be careful playing with some of these folders because you can mess up your system. So definitely don't mess with the boot directory. Most likely if you have a distribution like Ubuntu or something, this folder is created for you. So if you don't have much experience, don't go around messing with the boot directory because you can mess up the system. Okay, and the next folder is dev, which contains references to all the CPU hardware, which are represented as files with special properties. So that's pretty much what's there. Now etc is an important folder. Now just to explain it, this is where a lot of the system configurations are stored. So most of the applications that you install on your system, a lot of the configuration files are stored in this location. For instance, if you install Apache, MySQL, SSH, all the configuration files are stored under etc. So that's an important directory, and I've done videos on modifying configuration files, going into this folder and actually setting up actual programs and applications that need you to modify the configuration files. Well, that's normally where that's stored. Now the next folder is the home directory. This is where each of the users folders are stored. So if you create a new user, or whatever your user account is, if like mine is Josh, well, it's located under the home directory. And so when you log into the system, it automatically knows what your home directory is, and the default location for you is your home folder. So mine is Josh. So like whenever you see this tilde right here, that represents you're in your home directory. I'm in Josh's home directory. So it's a brief explanation of that. Now, lib, the next folder is lib. This basically stands for library. So these are files for all different types of programs, needed for the system, as well as the user. So it's pretty much libraries. Like, when people talk about, Python, adding libraries, a lot of times the libraries are loaded here. Now this is the 64-bit library. And as you can see, this is actually linked to the user lib directory. Both of these are. So your 64-bit and this is normally a 32-bit, or it used to be 32-bit. Some programs, use that directory as well. But as you can see, they're both linked to user /lib. So those are the actual locations, which is down here. So it's actually linked to down here. And then user also has that bin directory that I was talking about up here. The bin directory is under here. So the next thing is the lost and found. Now, just to explain, every partition has a lost and found in its uppermost directory. And this is where, let's say a failure happens, files that need to be saved will be stored in the lost and found. So that's a generated directory for files that they need to be stored if the system like crashes or something like that. Well, that's where that'll be located. Now the next folder is mount. And this is the standard mount point for external file systems like the CD drive. Let's say you plug in a digital camera or a SD card or something. This is where it will typically mount, or you will have to mount it manually. Now, most distributions nowadays, they use another directory further down, which is actually run. So I'll get to that in a second, but mount is the original location where most things would be mounted to. So if you put in a CD drive put in a CD, it'll mount at that location. Now, opt directory typically contains extra third-party software, so don't mess around in there. You know what I'm saying? Proct is a virtual file system containing information about system resources. So that's another location you don't want to really mess around in. Now this folder is called the root folder, which is typically the administrator user's home directory. This is the actual root directory for the actual root account. So whenever you log in with root, that's the root account. It's not stored under home like all the other user accounts. It's stored under its own folder called root. So just don't get it confused with here. This is the administrator account's home directory pretty much. Now run, I brought up run earlier when we were talking about mount. Well, run is typically used, I know, when you have GNOME installed or a few other distributions. When you plug something in like an external hard drive or something like that, it'll automatically mount to this point. A lot of times, some stuff you have to manually mount, but most of the time it will generally mount here. So if you're looking for external drive or something that you plugged in to via the command line, it's most likely under run. So just wanted to point that out to you guys. Now, SBIN is some more binary files and programs used by the system. Yeah, don't mess around in here, but this is all stored in the user bin. So that user directory is very important right here. So just don't mess around in there too often, unless you really understand what you're doing. Now, SRV, I really don't know much about, and I had to actually look this one up, and it contains site-specific data, which is served by the system. So, not sure what that actually does, but I wouldn't recommend messing around with this either. Now, sys is another folder I actually had to look up. I wasn't sure what it was, but Based on what I found, it's a virtual file system that can be accessed to set or obtain information about the kernel's view of the system. So I wouldn't recommend messing with that folder as well, but I mean, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of that one. I had to look it up just like SRV. So just don't mess around in there. The temp directory is basically a temporary space for the system. So like it's normally cleaned up upon reboot. So don't use this directory for anything. Cause if you put something there, it'll be deleted when you reboot the system, but it's a temporary directory for the system. So don't mess around with it. It's like, I know certain files when you're installing applications, it'll store it in the temp directory and then it'll wipe it once you reboot the system. So, okay. And so the big one, the USR or user directory. And this is basically for programs, libraries, documentation, etc. for all user related programs. So, it's just like these bins up here in the lib, the library directories, they all point to this user directory. Most of the programs, libraries, documentation, all that's stored under here. And lastly, the var directory. And this is basically storage for all variable files and temporary files created by the user, such as log files, mail queue, print spooler area, space for temporary storage of files downloaded from the internet. And one big thing I like to point out about the var directory, this is where Apache typically stores its HTML files, or if you have a website, you would typically store it under var. So it's really var www, and then it's normally a public HTML folder underneath that, where that's where Apache stores its websites, and that's where the default location for where it stores the web files, or HTML, PHP, all that good stuff. So whenever you like FTP into your web server, it's normally going to be under var www, and then public HTML or HTML directory. And then if you have multiple websites, then they'll be broken up under there, broken up by folder or based on whatever you name the website for in that folder, and it's linking back to Apache with the location. You know, it's all stored there. So that's pretty much it. Like I said, I wanted to show a high level overview of the file system so you guys can kind of get an understanding of how the Linux operating system works. I know I'm not that great at doing these videos, but I try to do my best. I know how to do this stuff, but it's kind of hard for me to explain a lot of this stuff. I just kind of understand how to do it, but as far as explaining it, I'm not that great. But I hope you guys got something out the video. So please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you have a question, leave a comment down below. And of course, keep it techie.